Welcome back to Curse, Code, and Crown, a live play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition podcast featuring a fully original world and campaign. I am the wizard Cronox, observer of time. Curse, Code, and Crown features our regular voiceover artists and improvisers, Laura Elizabeth as the Orc Count Eta and Princess Gwendolyn, Tyler Hewitt as Makka Deathcap, and Ryan LaPlante as Duncan Danno, alongside our dungeon master, the incredible Tom McGee. So get ready for an adventure including thrills, chills, and hope for a brighter tomorrow. It's time for Curse, Code, and Crown!
Well, your compatriots rot in an incredibly nice jail. Gwendolyn, you are brought to the presidential palace of Bleen. Now, being someone who is familiar with royal etiquette and kind of statecraft and everything else, a number of things are already kind of red flags around this. A presidential palace, for instance, is a bit of an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But unlike Duncan, who is kind of trained to understand immediately at looking at this system, kind of exactly where it sits and exactly what's going on, for you, it's a matter of, I think you intrinsically know a lot of these things from the observations you made at court. You just don't have the vocabulary that Duncan does for labeling them. So
right.
You're noticing, again, very ostentatious. Clearly, a lot of the same rules apply here, which is good. That does work to your benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if there's anything else you want to be kind of on the lookout for as you're brought into the palace.
I want to keep a lookout for any like basically servants, assistants, people who would have access to everywhere who are like looking downtrodden, because I'm like anyone who's basically I could take advantage of and get them to help me out.
Sure. Okay. Can you roll me a perception check, please?
Sure. Now, I do have advantage in perception on checks regarding Bleen courts. Would
right.
this be one of those?
Sorry, on just courts in general?
Bleen courts.
Yes,
all right.
You do.
Well, that's good. That's a 10. Shit.
So, as you're brought in to the palace through a side door, which the significance of which is not lost on you. You are you can see immediately that there are obviously a lot of servants around, but they seem to be going about their business in a very efficient and almost with a bit of a spring in their step. It's a far cry from what you remember from Orvel, certainly. And it strikes you that whatever the carrot that is being dangled to make these people work this way must be pretty legit, because there does seem to just be, and I mean, we've all felt this when we've gone into various places where it's like, oh no, the people here, like it's usually coffee shops I notice it the most, where it's like people who legitimately like their small business coffee shop they're running are like a far cry from like, welcome to Starbucks, my soul was crushed, here you go. And it is, unfortunately, there's some pep in the step. Now, it's not like people are like enthusiastic and smiling, but they are very efficient. That said, everyone is also sick. So you're definitely seeing a bunch of people trying to kind of go about the servant gig, but necessarily stopping every so often because of the nature of their sickness. And you are struck by the fact that one of your guards actually like sort of jabs a guy just kind of with an elbow as he walks by with like a back to work as he passes. And you realize that even though everyone here seems to be doing their jobs kind of to the fullest, and there's not that usual like, and I mean, there may be, but it's very well concealed that like, I hate what I'm doing. The fact that there is absolutely no concern for how sick these people are feeling gives you a bit of an in, because it's clear that Bleen is prepared for many things. This is not one of them. There are no etiquettes or protocols in place to accommodate this sort of thing. I think that the best model I can give you is
Province of Ontario.
Yeah.
Yes.
No sick days. Fuck you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in terms of how they're acting, it's like a really good hotel where it's not necessarily that everyone loves their job. They're just everyone actually has the foresight and the interest in presenting a nice expected front.
Right.
So yes, again, just to clarify, it's not like everyone's like, hooray, this, but there's, yeah.
Gotcha.
You are brought through some side hallways. Inside, this building looks a little bit like sort of the hallways of the White House, where everything is just like slightly over patterned carpet, a lot of like little pedestals with various trinkets from around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Paintings in a similar style to the statues you saw of tortles of import. And there are a god lot of like turtles shaking hands with people or like trading with people. Like a lot of those, I mean, usually in North America, it's like incredibly misleading, vaguely gaslighty paintings of like colonists and settlers showing up and just like hanging out with the indigenous population, and everyone's like super jazzed about it because it was painted by a white dude who's like, this is what happened, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of that. The turtles you notice though look like the heroes in all of these. There's a definite the strong arm side of history is clearly present here, where
Gotcha.
no matter what you're seeing, there's an awful lot of like the turtle seeming slightly more magnanimous and all that sort of stuff. Can you please roll me? We'll stick to perception, and you can use your turtle, your Bleen Court advantage. I forgot you had that. That's such a handy thing for this particular arc.
Yeah.
So glad you didn't
I wrote
die
that
in the
down.
Shadowlands.
That's a 19.
19. Something that you suspected is being confirmed by a lot of what you're seeing, which is it seems like Bleen, like they're overcompensating rather drastically in their art and their architecture and everything else. But you've noticed that even though there is their architecture is recognizable, there's no real style to it. Like I said, it's an architectural drawing. And you're starting to get the impression that there is, like, you're not seeing anything unique to Bleen here. You're seeing a lot of stuff that is unique and interesting from other cultures and other places. But Bleen itself doesn't seem to have any character identity aside from what it's managed to trade for, buy, and purchase. And you're starting to really get a sense of like, and I think weirdly, as sort of like biased and bigoted as your father is, he always did describe Bleen as just kind of like a means to an end. And you thought he was being facetious, but as you look around, you realize they kind of are. They're the middle people. Their job is to get things from one place to another. They don't necessarily create anything of value themselves. They're merely moving things through, which doesn't track with everything you've learned along your journey so far, but definitely from the looks of everything, there's a real sense of that, and a sense of overcompensation to hide the fact that they are collectors of culture, not generators of culture. With that, you're brought into a room that, had you seen the jails, you would recognize as very similar, if somewhat better appointed. But a large sitting room. Think again like a fancy hotel suite. It's clearly well appointed, but the window is just a little bit higher than it should be, and a little bit smaller and slightly reinforced. And very much like, we want you to be comfortable and feel like you're on vacation, but also clearly this is jail. You are sort of welcomed in, and a steward arrives and introduces himself, says, yes, hello, Your Majesty, and just like bows low and with reverence, and says, I've been assigned to be your personal steward and assistant while you are in our care. My name is Block, and I will be happy to assist you in any way necessary. If you require anything, there is a bell on the table. I would ask that you please don't abuse the bell, but you may use the bell to summon me at any time, day or night, and I will be happy to see to whatever you need. if you would like me to take your armor, if you would perhaps like it cleaned or polished, we can certainly make that happen. If you would like a robe or some finery, we have many wonderful fabrics from around the world that I think will be quite to your liking.
No, I mean, the armor's good. I'll just stay in it.
Very good, ma'am.
Now, when you say, like, you'll help me with anything, are there limits to that? Because I will hold you to that. Let's just say I'll hold you to that. Don't even tell me that there are limits. You're just going to help me with anything, right?
His shoulders drop a bit, and he's like, ma'am, I don't mean to be rude, but we hear that joke a lot, we stewards, and no, I can't help you get free. You can't use your wish for more wishes. I'm merely here to provide your necessities, but do understand there are limits, and no amount of you saying that there aren't will change that.
But
Stuart's good.
But I'm a diplomat.
No, ma'am.
And you have to maintain.
You're a hostage. And then the door closes.
Well, that was shit.
Meanwhile, Ida, you're having a much different experience. You've been brought into a large dining room, and there's only one setting placed, and you also have a steward sort of approach you. And she is, without a doubt, the most glamorous fucking turtle you've ever seen. Now, you weren't with these cats in the Root Folk adventure, so you are unfamiliar with Sundara, but she's done up with Root Folk Sundara. So just like full, like she got shot in the face with a makeup gun level of makeup. A good visual for this would be like the turtle equivalent of like Caesar Flickerman or Effie Trinket from the Hunger Games. Like it's very like ostentatious. Steward shows up, and she says, "Well, welcome, esteemed ambassador. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. Is it Ita? Is it something else that I'm unfamiliar with? My vocal cords are somewhat limited, but I will do my absolute best."
Well, I imagine that if you were addressing me as an ambassador, you would probably use my full name, which is Itaque Ego Discrepetere. However, I have learned that is difficult for people. So you may call me Ita.
Very good. I do apologize. If we had known that a representative from the Empire of Numbers was coming, I would have done my utmost to learn the full pronunciation of your name. I have had my vocal cords altered several times in order to be able to best articulate the various names of the various people you've seen. You may understand I speak slightly faster than most of my compatriots. It was painful but necessary, and just one of the many perks of staying here at the Palace of the Presidentia. Now, I must warn you, Presidentia Umos herself is not in state right now. But
wait, where is she?
That's a complicated story that you really need not concern yourself with. Happily, our government has been built in such a way that the Vice Presidentia is able to act very easily in the absence of the Presidentia herself, who, of course, has many very important engagements around the world. So Vice Presidentia Rootback will be along shortly to discuss things with you. In the meantime, we've prepared a variety of foods. We were not entirely certain, as we received no notice from the Empire as to your arrival, but we have several meals prepared. You can pick what you like. And if you need anything at all, she pulls a bell out of her pocket and hands it to you. So unlike the one that's affixed to the desk, this is like a carry-it-around bell. And you notice immediately, Ida, just turning it over in your hand, it has glyphs carved into it. And she just says, "This will summon me from anywhere in the palace." Now, of course, this being a fully functional government, seat of government, you won't have free reign of the place. From the dining hall here, when you're finished, please just ring the bell, or if you try and leave, I'll know, and I'll be happy to escort you to the sitting room, or the library, or to your bedroom.
I will most certainly want the library.
Excellent. Well, I will have it prepared. In the meantime, please enjoy your food. And if you need anything at all, please ring the bell. Again, I do apologize. No one is here to greet you. We are doing our best to rapidly put together a little diplomatic meeting. It's been a hot second, as they say, since anyone from the Empire visited, as I'm sure you know. So we're just eager to make sure that we can accommodate you any way we need to.
Well, if you would actually truly like to accommodate me, then you will have the current prisoners released, as well as Princess Gwendolyn of Orvel. They were traveling with me. That would be an acceptable accommodation.
Well, I tell you what. Why don't you reach out to the embassy at in the Empire of Numbers and have someone a little bit. I mean, no disrespect, but a little bit higher up the chain of command there. If indeed the Googleplex herself were to order prisoner release, we'd be happy to do it. But I'm afraid ambassadors do not have the legal authority here in Bleen to release prisoners. So if you would like to speak to the Googleplex, I'm sure as an ambassador of note and here on a mission perhaps to reestablish diplomatic ties, I'm sure she'd be all too happy to respond. Yes?
I have to admit, it is very confusing when someone says they will do anything to accommodate, and then they do not do those things that would accommodate. It almost seems that you were speaking an untruth before, no?
I forget how literal the Empire of Numbers is. Let me put this perhaps more clearly. We're happy to do whatever we can to accommodate you within reason as defined by us here, your host country, who is allowing you, someone from a nation who has very aggressively cut off ties with us, to visit unannounced with a known treasonous villain who is responsible for the possible destruction of our entire civilization. So there are some limits. Enjoy your meal.
I believe you will find that you are mistaken on the treasonous part. Also, your reason is subjective. I did not recognize it.
She stops, she turns, and she says, I believe it has become rather clear that you miss your friends. Please enjoy your meal. And then she turns to leave.
Like, it's like Ida and Gwendolyn are competing to see who can have the worst diplomatic impact.
Yeah. Who can forever shape the course of diplomacy in this world?
I just, I have my flaws, and you just present me with something, and I can't ignore my flaws. I just look at my sheet, basically like, I can't let this go.
That's role playing, baby. Meanwhile, back in the readjustment center, Makka and Duncan, you are collected to go and face the court. You're brought through the center, sort of through the corridors of the building. Again, a little bit of a kind of a brutalist, if you can imagine brutalist architecture with wood. Everything is very functional. There are no embellishments in here. It is, but at the same time, it's as nice and clean as something that's unadorned and meant to look vaguely threatening could be. You are brought to a large set of double doors that are opened by a pair of turtles upon your arrival. And brought into a courtroom. It's a large, sort of dome-shaped structure that has a number of openings sort of carved into the upper part of the dome to allow sort of very dramatic beams of light to kind of intersect across the room. There is a sort of a large podium where the judges where the judge sits, kind of in the center of the space, but further towards the north wall of the building. So it's not like dead center. It's a fairly standard, like as you'd imagine, a court setup, just in this sort of domed room. You're brought to the accused booth, which is kind of a small circular booth that is in front of the sort of judge's pillar. And there are a number of turtles in attendance, kind of listening. Makka, you can roll a perception check as you're brought in to see if there's anyone you recognize.
21.
Okay. Yeah, you recognize some people pretty high up in the government that you met when the delegation came to your swamp to demand your assistance in the diplomatic expedition to Orville. Knowing that you're, on speaking terms with or anything else, but it's clear from a glance that this is a pretty high profile event. This isn't a quiet thing. There's a lot of powerful people in the room. Duncan, is there anything you'd be looking for, do you think?
I think Duncan would just be watching to see if there's any actively hostile looking parties. Like, when you walk through the crowd, you're like, who are the fanciest dickheads who clearly hate my bodyguard client? I think he's in this situation, knowing that Makka is innocent of the whatever bullshit treason charges they're jumping up. He's almost thinking of Makka as the ward that needs to be protected in this circumstance. So who's hostile to Makka?
Right.
If you can spot it.
Can you roll a perception?
Yeah. That is 16.
Okay, so with a 16, it's everyone. Everyone is particularly hostile to Makka. The entire room kind of looks, and there's a lot of background glower, head shaking acting going on that extras are like to do. A lot of disapproving glances, a lot of kind of it's almost like a wave rolls across the room when he enters, and there seems to be a lot of consternation.
Great. He just says to himself as he keeps walking up to hear what the charges are.
So you're seated in the booth, and after a few moments, a bailiff announces Judge Hazel Knight Kell, who kind of sweeps into the room wearing just like full-on judge robes in a bright, brilliant red. And improbably is wearing a curled white judge's wig. They wear it with as anyone who has to wear a judge's wig does, wears it with like great pomp and circumstance, completely oblivious to how completely absurd this turtle looks with this wig. She comes in and kind of like waves to everyone to shut up. And looks like makes direct eye contact with you, Makka. You've never met Hazel Knight, but you did know her brother, Chestnut Kell, who was First Blade.
I was gonna say Duncan is displeased when he hears the name Kell because he's like, well, that first sword didn't make it.
Yeah. So both of you kind of knowing the score, the judge settles down into her seat and wipes her nose, and like somebody gets in the wig, and there's just that sense of just like cold fury, like Sideshow Bob stepping on a rake, cold fury about like the fact that this indignity has occurred. But not a great start to the case. She consults some notes, and she looks up and says, Makka Deathcap. I must say the court is rather surprised that you would return to Bleen after everything you've wrought upon our nation. Yet here you are. Now, I understand from Ambassador Longleaf that you, quote, ruined his shot at the orgy room and did not live up to his hard partying ways. He insisted I pronounce it that way, and I did. Nevertheless, this court is not concerned with rooms in which orgies occur. That seems childish nonsense. We are, however, quite concerned with the curse you have unleashed upon this nation, with your spores and your Jossie. We all suffer at your hands, traitor. Not only did you deliver the Presidentia into the hands of our enemies, but you have unleashed a plague upon us, and you have two very simple choices. You may confess to it, die quickly, and leave us to attempt to solve the mess that you have unleashed, or you can plead your innocence and perhaps find a way to solve it. Because frankly, that's about what it would take this court to believe you are truly innocent. But as is the way of our nation, you shall be judged by a jury of your peers. I must say, though, Mr. Deathcap, you will have a rather large reputation round these parts. It will hardly be impartial, but it's the best we can do. What do you have to say for yourself, traitor?
Makka looks to Duncan and gives like a thumbs up, and then just looks back and says nothing.
Well, it would seem that the accused is content with that series of events and is turning to their human counsel. I believe you introduced yourself as one Duncan Danno. Is that correct?
And Duncan will stand up and sweep his hat aside in a respectful kind of like bow his head and just say, as Duncan Danno, first captain of the Dawnbreakers, sworn to Lady Justice and protection of all good things in this world, including the Turtles of Bleen, Your Honor.
Very good. Mr. Danno, did you have anything to do with unleashing the curse upon Bleen? And she's giving you a look of like, just fucking say the thing I need you to say.
Absolutely not, Your Honor. I have been fighting alongside Makka for a long time, hoping to save the Turtles of Bleen.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. You're free to go. Mr. Deathcap, the charges of treason are no laughing matter, and while I appreciate the court jester you've brought with you, it will be up to you to prove yourself to this court one way or another. We have appointed the only counsel in Bleen willing to take your case. She will meet with you shortly. But given that your plea appears to be a thumbs up, I have no choice but to allow this ridiculous trial to move forward. We will reconvene in 2 days' time. Rest assured, I will get to the bottom of this as quickly as I am able. Until then, court is adjourned. Also, please, and she looks like just so exhausted at everyone assembled. She says, please remember this is a trial. This is an in-progress trial, and it is imperative you do not speak about this to anyone. And she just looks around with that, like, I know you're going to, but I have to say it look. And she just says, this is the turtle who has cost us everything. Do not screw this up, people of Bleen. We deserve answers and vengeance. And justice, but vengeance. Good day, Mr. Danno. Apologies on behalf of the consortium of Bleen for your incarceration. Mr. Longleaf has some rather strong ideas about what he's entitled to, and I disagree with all of them. You have my apologies, and you are free to go.
I appreciate that sentiment, Your Honor.
And with that, she's gone. Like you get back up and you just see like the classic like wig and robe just like fucking off out a door. Now, you are allowed to stay with Makka.
He's definitely doing that.
But you're no longer considered part of the trial because, as you indicated earlier, you had no part of this. This actual thing they're charging him with has literally nothing to do with you. So good for you. So the two of you are brought back to the readjustment center. Duncan, you can enter the cell by choice, kind of as a standing visitor, or they can give you a stool out in front. Which do you take?
If he can get in and out of the cell, he'll go into the cell. He's not really worried about like appearances in that regard.
So the two of you are in the cell. Makka, this just reminds you why you went further into the swamp back in the day. Like The judge has clearly already made up her mind about what's going to happen here. There's a jury, but it sounds like they're all biased. And it also, unfortunately, comes as no surprise to you that due to the events at Orville, you have been 100% scapegoated for the curse that had already afflicted Bleen when you left. The whole purpose was to seek help in Orville, and now it would seem that retroactively you are bearing the brunt of the blame. Is there any of this that you would convey to Duncan? Duncan is obviously a pretty savvy guy, and he's obviously making his own observations. But is there anything that Makka would feel necessary to share?
I think now that the charges have been laid out and Makka's understanding of don't speak until you've heard the charges has kind of been satisfied, Makka actually has a bunch of things to say to Duncan that he would have said yesterday.
Just been saving them up.
Yeah. He would say he would definitely bring Duncan up to speed on the situation in Bleen before his arrival in Orville, his reason for going to Orville. And, and there's some stuff that I don't know about in terms of the events leading up to my arrival in Orville that maybe you and I can figure out. But.
Well, so essentially what you're able to convey pretty quickly from your understanding of it is that the various creations you were making with spores were starting to lose their potency. And the healing that you were normally able to accomplish was growing less and less potent. You can consider it the way a vaccine is less potent over time as things develop, or the way caffeine doesn't have the same effect the longer you've been drinking caffeine. So all around Bleen, and there were you kept getting reports of people being it kind of worked, but it didn't really. And to you, this was greatly concerning because this obviously affects the cluster and is you hadn't changed anything, and you double checked and triple checked your recipes and your concoctions, and all of them were sound and should have been working. But you could also tell from the way you were working with spores that they were losing their effectiveness, and there was seemingly no reason for that you could ascertain. When the delegation and the Presidentia came knocking, they were bringing a gift of friendship on a diplomatic mission to Orville, but we're also seeking out some, to your understanding, they never went into tremendous details, but there was some suggestion that Orville might actually have something that could help with this, something they'd had for a long time. And that in theory, by presenting the case and with you explaining what was happening with the cluster and with your spores, they might be able to provide assistance. They didn't go into details as to what was being sought out, but to your mind, anyone who might have an answer as to why this was no longer working was worth consulting and worth going along for the trip with. It is safe to assume from the various mentions of the curse you've heard now elsewhere that the gradual decline in the effectiveness of the spores and the rise in the sickness is linked. But this is, to your mind, a much more advanced situation than what you left, but also you didn't spend any time in Sour, so this could have already been manifesting in minor ways, then you just weren't present for it. Yeah. So you convey all that to Duncan.
Yes. There's one thing that I would like to consult the cluster on as well. Can I, by reaching out to the cluster, to this spore network consciousness, can I detect an increase in death and decay in the city? Is this sickness such that it's causing people to die, or are people just ill and going on with their lives?
Can you roll for that?
Yeah, I think we were saying nature or religion.
I believe so, yes.
Which I think is the same modifier. Let's see, religion, and yeah, it's the same.
So it's both.
Yeah. So that's a +4, 11. That's 11.
You can sense death in the city, but not at the rate that a pandemic would be causing.
Yeah, not like an overwhelming.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But by the same token, you feel an alarming absence of decay.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. In addition to that, I think. So in addition to providing Duncan with all that information about like, this is like how I got involved and this is what's going on. I'm not responsible for this. But also I think he would want to talk to Duncan about, since Duncan is free to go, what is Duncan going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And if he needs anything from me, a Bleen native, although an outsider, like what does he need?
Well, Makka, I'm thinking you've got your defender, and we need to find out if they're the least bit competent, because you might just have someone who's a bit of a rabble-rouser who's very smart, or you might have someone who is, shall we say, ancient and confused about who you are, and either will greatly affect the game plan. I don't know your courts well. Do they allow trial by combat?
Is that something I'm aware of?
You have no idea. You didn't pay much attention.
I'll ask about that when we get to the defender. I think the question is, would it be more useful as some sort of private investigator, someone who could go out and look for evidence for your case and bring it back to a competent lawyer? Or if the lawyer is terrible, how quickly can I get myself qualified as a lawyer in Bleen so I can represent you in the court? The third option, and he'll just like look out the cell door to make sure nobody is like that close and lean back in and kind of whisper. He's like, it seems like your courts are not exactly unbiased. Now, I know you didn't do this crime, and if they were giving you a fair trial, no Dawnbreaker would ever interfere. But if they're going to give you a crooked trial, then it sort of becomes inherently necessary for me to try to, one could say, unbalance the scales in an equal amount the other way. We'll only know once you've had a lawyer, but maybe the judge needs a favor. Only positive things. I'm not talking about intimidation or extortion or any of that shite. I don't do it. But there may be people who need help with things.
You just hear a voice say, well, hey now, let's not take those ones off the table yet. Huh? And as you look back out, coming down the hall is a turtle wearing a bright pink suit. That is like cut in such a way that it kind of like, it's clearly from a different culture. Like it would probably fit Ida. Like it looks sort of orcish and cut in design, but she's clearly like sliced it so she can wear it over her shell. So it really is like a flappy like vest now, but it's in theory a power suit. She has matching, again, like shades of Glomra, matching lipstick around her whole tortly mouth. And to your surprise, has actually painted the sort of like claws at the end of her fingers in the same color. And she is marching with like a blazing grin on her tortly face, and is being led by a small creature that's hopping in front of her on a lead. And the creature kind of like hops to a stop and then tugs on the leash, and as a result, she stops as well. And she just says, listen, your friend, he's got a lot of this right. It is an unbalanced trial. And I think he's right. We don't want to, ruin anything here. But who's to say that, a servant of Lady Justice, like this fella I heard talking earlier, who's to say that he can't, just nudge things the right way? Am I right? Because everybody needs a favor. And honestly, everyone needs good representation. Speaking of, name's Murdoch Truegood. I'm your lawyer. This here's my CNI frog, Dennis. And together, we are going to unfuck you. Who's ready to get legal?
This episode of Curse Code and Crowd Sound was mixed and edited by Laura Hamstra, and the campaign was created by Tom McGee. Our original theme music was composed by Landon Knoblock, and Curse Code and Crown's logo was created by the brilliant Decapitated Markers. If you want to follow our players or our DM on Twitter, you can reach out to Laura at ELHamstring, Ryan at the Ryan LaPlante, Tyler at Tyler_Hewitt, Tom McGee at McGeeTD, or you can message our whole company at DumDumDice. So please, join us again for more Curse, Code, and Crown!
Dum Dums and Dice has to give a special thank you to the supreme beings of our Patreon at this time: Christian Menicola, Long Long, the Half-Blind Prophet, James Cuellar, Charles Grams, Christopher Little, Sue One, George Dolby, One True Artistry, Orion Birchfield, Lord of Bradovic, Noel Lewis, Scott Garland, Anthony Griffin, Chet Awesome Laser, Jordan Neesmith, Benjamin V, Gavin and Abby McDonald, Taryn Hefner, Cade Peters, Richard Cranium, Christian Mendez, Anna Zed, Eric Williams, Logan, Fire Unfriendly, Great Dane, Acrix, and Jill and Noel LaPlante. If you want your name to be added to this list, you can join our Patreon too at patreon.com/dumdumdice. Thanks to them, and a little bit of thanks to you.